I'll press Ctrl R. Let's type in the nodes that we need. To start off, we have our eyebrow, top lid, eye base, iris, pupil, and highlight. I'll select, I'll press Alt, select the comp, and we have them all connected. Let's select them all and press Ctrl Shift P, and now each of them has their own peg. So we're ready to start drawing in the artwork. Let's start on the eye base. I'm going to use my rectangle tool, and with our contour editor, you can even turn on snapping if you want. I'm just going to match up our lines to this outer shape of the eye. And with our line tool, we can come to the bottom and just get this line in. You can use your pencil editor to also taper the ends of that line. So notice on these anime eyes, there's some empty space between our lines. So what we can do, we can take our close gap tool and we kind of just close the gaps between here. And the cool thing is, if we use our contour editor, we can still edit these lines. We fill that in with black. So this is what our line art looks like. We press K, we can see those individual strokes. And if we create color art from line art, you can see we can fill in that area with white. Now we have a little extra space here, so we can use our cutter tool or hold T and just swipe across to get rid of the excess color art. Perfect. The pupil's next, and it can be a little tricky because of all those details. So let's try and keep everything very organized. We need our iris, pupil, highlight, and I also added a shadow. Create a new composite and plug everything into that new one. Now we plug this into our main comp. Make sure we're on our line art, and let's start creating the art for each of these nodes. The pupil, even though it's cut off in my design, I want to draw the whole thing. The iris, we can copy our pupil, paste it, and then just hold Alt and Shift and scale it down. For our highlights, we'll use white and just draw those two circles there. And for our shadow color, we can create a new color ID, maybe make the alpha around half. With our rectangle tool, I just follow that outline and fill it in. We can even select the outer line and delete that so it looks a little bit cleaner. Now we can go in and fill in all the colors, and we should have something that looks like this. So we drew our highlights, our shadow, our iris, and our pupil. We're also probably noticing that the shadow is kind of outside of the pupil, and if we activate our eye again, how do we get that pupil to sit inside the eye? So first of all, let's get this shadow inside our pupil. We're going to need our line art filter and our color art filter, and we're going to plug those in to our pupil. We're going to replace the cord, and now we can plug them in again. So this allows us to separate the line and the color so we can layer it on top of the shadow. So if I want my line to be in front of the shadow, I'll plug it in here. And now, get a cutter, and I'll plug it underneath my shadow. And using my color art, I can cut the shadow. We're going to have to invert it, so double click on this little mask. And suddenly, our shadow is inside our pupil. So here's a little challenge for you guys. We just cut the shadow inside our pupil. Now we need to cut our pupil inside our eye base. So take a couple of minutes now and see if you can figure out how to do it on your own. Okay, here is our solution. You can see for the eye base, we use those line art and color art filters. We used a cutter to cut the entire composite of all of our pupil pieces. It's inverted, and we made sure that our line art is plugged in front and our color art is plugged behind our pupil. Alright, moving on. So let's do our eyelid now. So what I want to do is have the top lid be just this top part, and as we pull it down, I want to kind of cut everything above it so we don't see it. We go back to our eye base on the line art. I can copy what I have here and paste it on my top lid. Now it's easier to modify. I can just delete a couple of points, just a few others, and we should be ready for our next step. I'm going to create color art from line art, but this time I'm going to use my invisible stroke tool. I'm just going to draw a little box around the top of my eye. Notice I have this pressed, so my lines are perfectly straight. So now using our contour editor, let's zoom in. We can make sure this is checked, snap to contour. And see how it snaps right to those points? You can kind of round this a little bit the last thing we want to do is kind of swipe away the bottom parts of our color art. So I'll just get rid of this, get rid of that, and leave that. So we only have our top part. I'm going to go in with a green color and fill it in just like that. The line art and color art, we're going to plug those in. We can even get rid of this line for now. Let's create another composite. We'll plug in our line art so it's in front of everything. And now using that cutter again, we're going to plug in our color art. But this time, instead of it being inverted, it's just going to be normal. So double click, and suddenly that takes care of that green thing. So if we move our top lid down like this, you'll see that it's disappearing. Okay, so challenge number 2. So we used our art layers to cut the eye when we bring the eyelid down. We're going to do the same thing for the eyebrow. So take a second now and see if you can figure it out on your own. So, did you figure it out? If we take a look at our node view, it's exactly the same setup. Line art, color art. We go all the way down here. We added another composite so we can plug our line art in front, and we added another cutter so we can cut the rest of our eye with that color art. I hope you're noticing that we're using the same concepts to get different results. A lot of rigging, once you know the basics, you can kind of apply it to so many different things. Next part is going to be a lot of fun. We need to figure out a way how to connect the eyelashes to our top lid. Not only do we want them to move together when we move the peg up and down, but we also want to keep them together if we have a deformer and we use that deformation. So let's see if we can figure it out. Okay, so first thing, we have all our lashes drawn, and we have them connected to their own peg so we can move them all together. We connected it to the top lid, so now if we move that peg, everything moves as one. But the problem is we have a deformer. When I want to deform this, suddenly these don't follow anymore. So what's going to help with that is something called a point kinematic output. We can plug it above the lash that we want, and we plug it right into our lid deformer. Just like that. If we select it and press this button up here, you'll see a blue dot shows up. You can take it and kind of move it where we want that lash to be connected. I find it's best to treat it like a pivot point. Now, if I move my deformation, suddenly that lash moves with it. And now I can use my peg to adjust it even further. So I can even throw a deformer on this lash so I can manipulate it even more. You do the same thing with the rest of the lashes, and then you'll have something that looks like this. So now we can move and we can deform, and things will start to follow. Some final touches, what we can do, go into each of these pegs, and we can adjust our pivot point. So if we have this toolbar up here, it's the advanced animation toolbar, I press this rotation, and I can permanently adjust where I want my pivot points to be. Those are good. My eye base, I'll bring this down a little bit here. Top lid, I'll move the pivot point to the corner. And for my eyebrow, I'm going to do the same thing. We can add a peg on top of everything. We can rename it Eye Master. And if we plug that into our eyebrow, we can plug our eye base into our pupil, and then we plug that into the master. Now we have a peg that moves everything together. We can even take the pivot information from our eye base, copy it over. So now our eye master is in a better spot. And with that done, we can now throw some deformers on the other pieces of the eye. So let's say for the eye base, I have a couple of deformers that I added. Now I can kind of control this even more when I want to do something like a blink. And now to keep everything super organized, we'll select all the pegs below our eye master, just like this. We can press Control G, and suddenly everything is grouped really nice and neat. We can rename it eye, and we might have to go in and unplug these point kinematic pieces. And there we go. Now everything's ready to clone and do whatever you want. So that's an anime eye, guys. It's a little bit tricky compared to a regular cartoon eye, just simply because, you know, it's not one continuous piece. There's some eyelashes that need to be connected, and there's lots of details in the eye itself. And play around with it. There's lots of different anime eye designs, which may cause you to tweak your eye a little bit more. Any questions, guys, let me know in the comments, and I'll see everybody in the next video.